Basra Daf Kuf Mem Bet Amud Bet. Opinions matter, b'ta'amah Talיא miltã, particularly in our times today where opinions are so polarized, both in the areas of Torah and in every other area, where we're very quick to discount the opinions of people with whom we disagree. We see in Torah it doesn't work that way. That there are some opinions which become halachik decisions, and that becomes psak halacha. But there are a fortune of opinions which don't make it to psak halacha. They're not actually the way we paskin, but yet they're always recorded. We'll see that the Mishnahs and the Gemara records countless minority opinions, countless opinions of people like whom we don't decide the halacha. What is the role of those opinions? Why are they so important? And how are we meant to relate to opinions that don't form part of decided halacha? And we begin to understand this in the process. We're going to meet and get to know Reb Simcha Wasserman, the son of Reb Elchanan Wasserman. It comes in our Gemara where there's a machlokas, that we won't go into, a difference of opinion, by two schools of thought. One is led by Rabbi Avahu and one is led by Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Avahu then says to Rabbi Yirmiyah, Hilchata kavatan or Hilchata kavataychu? Who is the halacha like? Is the halacha like us or is the halacha like you? So this whole debate takes place without the context of halachik decisions even. They don't even know yet that Rabbi Avahu is having a discussion with Rabbi Yirmiyah and he doesn't even know who the halacha is. It's not relevant yet. Once they've established their viewpoints, the question becomes, so now how do we decide the halacha? And Rabbi Avahu says to Rabbi Yirmiyah, how is it's halacha? Amalei says to him, I've put the names in brackets here the way Rabbeinu Gershom does, because it can be quite confusing with all the Amarles backwards and forwards. So Amarle, so Rabbi Yirmiyah answers Rabbi Avahu and says, Pshita de hilchata kavatan. Clearly the halacha is like us, like our school. Why? De kashishna minaychu, we're older than you. That's that. We've been around longer than you. You children, you young, the halacha is not like you. It's a strange Gemara. Are you serious? Are you going to tell me you're going to decide halacha based on the age of the people who are having the discussion? Surely this should be decided by reason. What is the reason of it? What's the svara? Surely you'll go into the thinking and you'll make the halachic decision on the basis of the thinking, not the seniority. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, V'ta'amah, thank you very much. And what are the reasons? We've been having this discussion, but nobody's offered a reason. So Rabbi Avahu answers, I'm not sure of the reason, but Zil legabi de Rabbi Avin, go to Rabbi Avin. De asbarteni halei, because I told Rabbi Avin our view, v'charkish bareshe be'medrasha. And when I gave him our view, he nodded his head. So clearly he saw reason in it. Because I didn't give it to him as opposed to any other view. It wasn't a matter about who's older, who's younger. I just gave him a viewpoint and he nodded. That was the sum total of the conversation, was just the nod, and the nod is all that he needed. If Rabbi Avin nodded, then clearly Rabbi Avin saw the logic in the view of Rabbi Avahu. And in the next Talmud it goes on to what that logic is, which is not what I want to focus on. I really want to focus on this whole concept of hilchah kavatan or hilchah kavataychu. Who's the halacha like? Is it like us or like you? That's a phrase that we've had before. That very phrase of hilchah kavatan or hilchah kavataychu we have on Daf Samachay Amud Aleph. And if your memory is not so good that you remember it from Daf Samachay Amud Aleph, then fortunately we now have the Mesoras Hashas on the side of the Gemara. The Mesoras Hashas was written by the Shiltei Giborim in the 16th century. It's the hyperlinking system of Shas, where whenever there's a piece of Gemara that has relevance or is quoted elsewhere in Shas, the Mesoras Hashas puts it. The Shiltei Giborim wrote that for us to be able to know. It was expanded later on in the 17th century. It was expanded, the Mesoras Hashas, and the expansion we have in brackets. So you'll see I've put a little daled by the Hilchah Kavasan, and the Mesoras Hashas is Le'el Daf Samachay Amud Aleph. So you see from the Masoras Hashas that he doesn't expect, or by that time it was understood that not everybody's going to be a Boki, that not everybody's going to remember and know all the Gemaras, all the Sugyas, all over Shas, that we need the ability to hyperlink, and the Masoras Hashas does the hyperlinking for us in a way that Tosfos does as well, the hyperlinking. But Tosfos hyperlinks conceptually. When there's a conceptual linkage, Tosfos will make the hyperlink, something that our computer hyperlinking system can't yet do, I don't think. To recognize a pattern, maybe with artificial intelligence it can, to recognize a pattern, although the same words don't appear, and it's in fact on a completely different topic, Tosfos will show that there's a similarity in underlying principle that you need to refer to that Gemara to in order to understand this Gemara. But the Masoras Hashas is just on the surface wherever there's a similar wording. And we have this wording back on Bava Batra Daf Samachay in our Masechta, where exactly the same word is used by Rav Nachman in conversation with Rav Huna. Hilcha kevatinu, hilcha kevataychu. Is the halacha like us or like you? Once again, they're having a conversation without clarity as to who the halacha is. And they're not all going saying the halacha is like me. They're not arguing because they think that's the halacha necessarily. When one gives an opinion, one doesn't have to give the opinion because you believe that's the only opinion, that's the final opinion. You're giving your worldview, you're giving your perception, the way you've learned, the way you've come out. And in fact, in that case, Rav Huna answers and says, the halacha is like you, not like me. Why is the halacha like you? Because you hang out with the Reish Gelusa where a lot of shilas come and a lot of court cases are held. So you're well schooled in these halachas and how they reason. You have an advantage over me, and therefore the halacha is like you. So in both these Gemaras we see an extraneous dimension used in the decision for halacha, or at least a consideration that possibly an extraneous one should be used. In our Gemara it's age. Certainly seniority, but not only seniority, even just age. And on Daf Samachay, it's context. You've been around, you've had a Masorah, you've had Shimush, you're familiar with these things, you've seen these things, you're in a different state of being. So why does Rav Huna even argue with Rav Nachman? If Rav Nachman has that advantage of having hung out at Reish Geluta's Beis Din, why does he even argue with him? Because that's our obligation. Each one has to learn the way we learn. If you've been given the method and the approach, and you have the Yiras Shamayim to go through a sugya properly, you've got to come out the way you come out. That doesn't mean that that's the halacha, but you've got to be integrous to your own system of thinking, not just to copy and paste somebody else's because they're bigger than you, stronger than you, older than you, wiser than you. We don't copy and paste. There's got to be originality. When we're learning, there's got to be originality. Says Reb Simcha Wasserman. So I found this Reb Simcha Wasserman at the back of the Kovetz He'oros. The Kovetz He'oros is Reb Elchanan Wasserman's sefer. And Reb Simcha Wasserman was involved in publishing Reb Elchanan's works. Reb Simcha Wasserman was from our time. He died only 30 years ago. I knew him well, and we had some amazing conversations. Reb Simcha Wasserman lived in Los Angeles. He went to America with his father in 1939, and his father decided he has to go back to Europe and be with his yeshiva, even though things were looking really bad. But he asked Reb Simcha to stay in the United States. And Reb Simcha stayed in Los Angeles, where he founded a yeshiva and he taught Torah. People didn't even know him. And my brother, Reb Doniel, actually made him known in Los Angeles to some degree, because he started the first movement of Baalei Tshuva in Los Angeles, in the Venice community, and he used to bring Reb Simcha to speak to the Baalei Tshuva in Venice so that they would see what a Lithuanian Godel looks like. Reb Simcha Wasserman was from Lithuania. He was part of that school. I've often said to you that we were fortunate to be the last of that generation that learned Torah from the Gedolim of Lithuania. It wasn't the post-war era. The people that I was zochet to learn Torah from were Gedolei Yisrael in Lithuania already. And Reb Simcha Wasserman was such a person, so my brother used to bring him to Venice. Imagine the son of Reb Elchanan Wasserman in Venice. In Venice, United States. Those of you who know Venice Beach, Venice Beach, the shul is Venice Beach. And there was Reb Elchanan, and Reb Simcha used to give shiurim in the shul so that the people would see him. And I invited him once to speak in our shul in Johannesburg. I don't know if you remember, David, you were probably too young. I had some amazing conversations with him. One of the most important things that he taught me was the power of innovation in accurate translation. Just translate the words carefully. He said, if you translate the words carefully, everything opens up. You understand things in a completely different way. And I still remember him saying, he took my arm and he said, so how do you translate Dorash? How often do you say, Dorash Rabbi so-and-so, Dorash Rabbi Simloi, so-and-so had a drosha. I said, so-and-so learnt. He said, no, the word Dorash comes from Doresh. Doresh means to search. And therefore Dorash means to research. And that changed everything for me until this day. Dorash so-and-so. It's a research exercise. That's what a drosha is. You research and you find something new. You find an angle that wasn't there before. When a Rav gives a drosha in shul, it's meant to be a research paper, a discovery of something new that wasn't there before. That's a drosha. Otherwise, it's a vort. It's something that he picked up from somewhere or whatever. A drosha means he's researched and he's discovered a new angle. That's what a drosha is. And I remember Reb Simcha getting so excited when he showed me how he applies that, and many examples, being careful how you translate a word. And he writes at the back of Reb Elchon's Sefer, he writes on this Gemara on Daf Samachay, that hakavana k'shehasvarot shkulot tzarich lachriya mi bar samcha yoter. We're not talking about when there's logic in favor of one of the views. Then you've got to go like the logic. We're talking about situations where you can't find a preference. They seem to be equally weighted. You learn the view of the one and it makes perfect sense. You learn the view of the other and it makes perfect sense. And you can't reach a conclusion. Then you look at seniority. Then you look at who are the people involved, who is the authority. The person with the greater authority is the view that you take. And again, part of that, the privilege of that generation that I talked to you about, when we were in yeshiva, we still had the opportunity to be trained by Gedolei Israel, not taught by Gedolei Israel. We weren't taught what to know, we were trained how to think. We were trained how to reach halachik conclusion. Smicha in those days wasn't about knowing the halacha. Smicha was an oral test. You had the sforim in front of you. It was a conversation with a godel. That's how you got smicha. And what they wanted to test was not whether you knew the halacha. You can look on the internet to get the halacha. And even though there wasn't the internet in those days, there was sforim. You don't need to know the halachas. What you need to know is how to reason with the halachas. You need to know how to apply the halachas to a new situation, which you can't find in the halacha. And that's what we were trained to do. So you clearly remember we're having a conversation in halacha with Rabbi Elia Mishkovsky, with Marosh Yeshiva. So I asked him a shaila, something that was applicable, and he asked me, as he always would, so what do you think? So I knew already that I had to have done my homework, so I told him what I thought, and then he destroyed me. Backwards and forwards, he destroyed me. I felt like nothing when he was finished with me. So I'm walking out, and he stops and he says, so what are you going to decide? What are you going to say? How are you going to paskin? I said, well, I don't think that's any question anymore. I was going to paskin like this, but he said, you can't just do it because I said so. I've given you my view. That's one of your inputs. So go and relearn the sugya, relearn it, and see how you come out now. If you come out like me, then you paskin, like I've said. But if you still come out the way you did, you paskin the way you did. You don't just take it on because I've said. If you have reason, the only time we follow authority is when reason fails, because we can't find a preference in reason. That's an important chidush in Reb Simcha Wasserman here. And he brings various examples of that. Even the case of a bat kol, where the Rambam says the bat kol makes the decision that we follow Beis Hillel rather than Beis Shammai, because there's no other way we could get to that conclusion. We needed the bat kol. But in the Tanur Shel Achnai in Bava Metzia, we've got the opposite case, where there is an opportunity to reach a conclusion halachically. And there Rabbi Yeshua gets up and says, keep out of it, Bat Kol. We can figure this out ourselves. We don't need you. And even if we disagree with you, we've got to paskin the way we reason. That's Lo B'Shamayim Hi. That's the Rebbeinu Shem giving us the Torah, is so that we reason with the Torah the way we need to do it. And our Gemara here is talking about a case where they couldn't reach a conclusion. Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Avo. And that's why he says, Hilchas Kavatan or Hilchas Kavataychu. Who's the greater authority here? And this Reb Simcha Wasserman is based on a Reb Chonon Wasserman on the next page of the source sheet, which is from our Gemara. In Kovet Shiurim, Reb Chonon Wasserman deals and explains our Gemara, and says over here, there's always two ways to reach a halachic conclusion. Either the authority of those who are arguing, or by the content of the argument. And it's where you can't, and the question here in Al Gemara, who's the halacha like, is so that when you're unable to reach a decision, who should you follow? And the question is, does old age count as an authority? And says Rabbi Chonon, our Gemara doesn't reach a conclusion about that because we find logic to intervene. So the real issue in our Gemara is we understand that authority, chokhmah, wisdom is a reason to paskin like somebody. We understand that the content of the argument, the viewpoint, is a reason to paskin. Is age, is seniority a reason to paskin? And that's the suggestion that Rabbi Avo comes with, and Rav Yirmiyah says, yes, we're older than you. And Rabbi Avo says, really? Is age a factor in psak? And says Rabbi Chonon, that doesn't get answered. We don't actually have an answer to that question here in the sugya, because we get into Ravin, who actually understands the reason for the halacha, and so that gets pushed aside. But why do we bring all these minority opinions, even though we don't paskin like them? Why are they so important? There's a wonderful work that has been created by Reb Sholem Meir Jungerman, who only died 20 years ago or less. He was the person who established Frum communities in Zichron Yaakov. Wherever there's a Frum community, he brought Torah to Zichron Yaakov. And he devoted a lot of his later years to creating the Kovis Shitut Kamoi, where he brings little snippets of Rishonim that never got published in a sefer. And he puts them together in the order of Shas. And here he brings a view from Rabbi Shimshon Mikinon, who was at the time of the Tosfos. He was in France, and he wrote a sefer called the Sefer Krisus. And the Sefer Krisus are the principles of Psak, the way the Gemara is structured. It's a beautiful halachik Torah academic work. And he says, Ki mesapkelu I halacha kevataychu Allah. And he goes on and he says, We'll see in the Gemara, they give their viewpoints even they know they're not halachically valid. And he brings various proofs, including our Gemara, that even though there's a question whether my view is halachically valid, I don't know if it is your view halachically valid? And he brings other views where it's clear that it's not halachically valid, but they still express their views. Because a halachic opinion is an input into the ongoing process of halachic evolution. A Rov might one day decide, in this particular case, I'm going to utilize a minority view that we've never paskined like. But in this particular case, it's relevant. In this particular case, I'll join it together with some other factor, and that will give me the opportunity to find a heter. That will give me an opportunity to solve a halachic problem. So these minority views are really important parts of halachic evolution, explains Reb Shimshon Mikinon. And we actually have it in a Mishnah in Adius, which teaches us the method of psak, where the Mishnah itself asks the question. V'lama mazkirin, you'll get to it in the Mishnah Adius. V'lama mazkirin divrei hayachid bein amrubim. Why does a Mishnah bring the minority opinion? Hu vein halachai, like divrei amrubim, because the halacha is only like the majority. Answers the Mishnah. She'im yir'eh beit din et divrei hayachid v'yitzmoch alav. There could be a Beis Din in the future that chooses to paskin like the minority opinion for various reasons. That we have the right to do that. Then the Mishnah says, later on, you can't overturn that. That becomes a very authoritative decision. It's very difficult to overturn. The Rav explains that, the Rav Mibartanur. So we need to understand that opinions are, there's psak halacha, and there is the reasoning of halacha, and there's the context of the authors of halacha. And those are all factors in the process of halachic reasoning. If we don't consider all of that, halacha becomes fundamentalist. Halacha becomes rigid. There's nothing you can do to apply, there's nothing you can do to solve a halachic problem because you're stuck with what was given as a final decision. And that's why Rav Moshe Feinstein gave an instruction to his family and to others not to publish his final opinions. If they publish any of his opinions, it's got to be with the reasoning. And he explained to me so that Rabbonim like you, he said, will be free to hear my reasoning and to choose to disagree if you want to. Otherwise, halacha has no flow. You're in a different situation. You can't just go by the way I paskined in New York. You can't just go by the way that a person paskined in Kovna. You've got to take that reasoning and work with that reasoning to decide in your own era, in your own situation, does that reasoning apply or not? But where the reasoning doesn't help, because there's reasoning both ways that's equally valid, we look at the context. Who is the author? who is the authority, how much authority do they have, and possibly even according to our Gemara, how senior, what is their age. If there's nothing else to differentiate them, then possibly the one who's older, the one who's been around longer, is the one whose halachik opinion will apply. And in these days of polarization, it's really important to appreciate that even in general areas, not only in Torah, that people have opinions which are not taken over. People voted for parties that did not win. It doesn't mean that those opinions are now invalid. A lot of people had those opinions. A lot of intelligent people had opinions. One has to create space for opinions that aren't adopted. One has to create space for opinions you don't agree with, because those opinions create fluidity and create breadth of thinking that allows an individual or a group of individuals to navigate their way through complex realities and reach conclusions that are relevant for our times and conclusions that are relevant for the individuals involved.